Hi. Hi. Hi.
Bored na bored? Mag-V-Smart quiz na! With more than 2,000 questions from numerous topics, this app will keep you entertained habang nagpapatalas ng isipan. I-challenge ang sarili by choosing the level of difficulty. Makipagtagisan din ng galing at talino sa ibang manlalaro sa amang lupalop ng mundo. Para magkaalaman kung sino ang tunay na quiz master. Sa V-Smart Quiz app, lahat ng stress and boredom will all be gone.
Hi! Mag-download na rin kayo ng V-Smart Quiz app.
Now available on Google Play Store and Apple App Store.
Good day, Kavibal, and welcome to our YouTube webinar session. For the discussion today, the topic will be on transitioning to the next normal, preparing for the shift to hybrid Hyflex learning. Before we begin, take note of the following reminders. Make sure you're registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.vibalgroup.com to generate your proof of attendance, or you may also use eturo.org. Share the video using hashtag LearnAs1PH as our official hashtag to all our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, Kavibal! And now, to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker today. Our speaker for today is an educator by profession and by heart. She has a degree in Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English, and is currently completing her degree in Master of Arts in English with specialization in teaching English to speakers of other languages, or TESOL. She has had the privilege of teaching elementary, high school, and college students before she assumed office as school principal and served as the accreditation and training coordinator of the Elementary School of Silliman University. Her experience with varied groups of learners has affirmed her belief that teachers should first get to know their learners in order to create an engaging and effective teaching learning environment. She constantly pursues professional development, particularly in the areas of pedagogy, leadership, and personal management. She considers speaking and sharing with fellow educators her passion project and is grateful for every opportunity to impart and contribute to the academy. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Ms. Dobie Flores Estalio.
Good afternoon, fellow educators, and welcome to our session today on hybrid and Hyflex learning. I am your resource person for this afternoon. I am Dobby Flores Estalio, and allow me to walk you through our topic on transitioning towards the next normal, and that is through preparing for the shift to hybrid and Hyflex learning. So let us now get started with our presentation. And I think you can already see my slide. Okay, and the title for our session this afternoon is right on your screens. It is transitioning to the next normal, preparing for the shift to hybrid or Hyflex learning. It is my hope that there is something that you can take away from this session this afternoon, and I hope that this could also enrich your teaching in your respective institutions. So let us now get started. Welcome to the next normal in education. So when we say next normal, we're actually talking about our way of life and our way of teaching in the context of the academe after we have gotten used to, or after we have achieved a particular sense of normalcy with the fact that we are living with COVID-19. So, how does the next normal in education looks like? First, it is learner centered. Okay, the student's needs, capabilities, preferences, and realities are considered. Of course, unlike the past, pre-COVID times, yes, we talk about considering students' needs and capabilities, but not in as much, we don't give as much emphasis to it as we do now. Because right now we have to also consider the fact that if we adopt a particular teaching learning modality in school, we also have to look at the internet connectivity of our students, for example. Their access to gadgets is another consideration. The availability of people who would be around to assist them with their learning, especially for those students in the basic education. So these are things that we have to consider more in the next normal. And in fact, we also take a look at their preferences and take that as part of the factors to consider when we offer our services to them. Next, it is flexible. Definitely, we are giving them more options now than we ever have had in the past. And we're talking here of flexibility not only in the different teaching modalities, which we shall talk about more of in the next slide, but also in the process of learning. As you can see, learners now can study on their own. They can embark on self-directed learning. They also have peer-assisted learning on top of our traditional instructor-led learning processes. The next normal in education is without a doubt multimodal. There is more than one way of teaching and learning, not just necessarily face to face. And it is accessible. Learning may now happen anytime, anywhere. And we have seen that in the modular offerings of certain schools in our country. We've seen that in the online offerings of other schools in our country, wherein students have the option, especially for asynchronous sessions, to study at their convenience anywhere they want to, for as long as they have access to the materials that they need for school. So welcome to the next normal in education, and we obviously are already thrust here thanks to COVID. Now let's talk about the 5 teaching modalities that are in existence, not only in our country but also worldwide. First, we have the face-to-face, which I don't need to explain further about. We are experts at this and we know this by heart. Next is the blended teaching modality, which really includes face-to-face element plus the IT or technology-based instruction. So in the Philippine context, we practice the following forms of blended learning. We have face-to-face plus online. Other schools are adopting face-to-face plus modular. Other schools are doing face-to-face plus TV or radio-based instruction, and then of course any other ICT-based instruction that is neither TV nor radio also falls under this category. So because of COVID, we had to shift from purely face-to-face to blended teaching modality. And then other schools also adopted the fully online teaching modality. It is remote. Students don't have to report to school physically. They don't have to see their teachers and classmates face to face. Instead, they take classes and accomplish their learning goals through the use of a learning management system, which is done online. And of course, as we gradually improved, as the health conditions in the country improved and the alert levels also started to decrease, we eventually embarked on hybrid teaching modality, which is part face-to-face. There are certain days wherein students physically report to class for limited face-to-face classes, and which is also part online. And finally, the latest, and which is being tested out in some schools in the country, and which other schools abroad have already been piloting. And in fact, other schools, particularly in the tertiary and graduate schools, have been using for the past 10 years in certain schools and universities abroad. We have the Hyflex teaching modality, which is actually a blend of the words hybrid plus flexible. Okay, in the Hyflex component, or in the Hyflex modality, you have the face-to-face component plus the online component plus the flexibility that is afforded to students in their choice of face-to-face and online schedules. And we shall be expounding on Hyflex learning a little bit more in this afternoon session. Okay, what is Hyflex learning? It is a learning modality that combines the face-to-face and online components while giving students the flexibility in choosing the mode and schedule to follow in engaging with the course and completing course requirements and learning outcomes. Now, if you're going to combine hybrid with Hyflex learning, it will look like this. Hybrid is face-to-face plus online. So you have to have both components in place in order for you to be able to say that a particular teaching learning modality is hybrid. And of course, needless to say, when we talk about online, we are referring to both synchronous, as in real-time classes, wherein teachers and students meet in the virtual classroom and they have real-time class, and of course the asynchronous component, which is recorded or which students can do at any particular time outside of their class hours or even during their class hours. Hyflex, on the other hand, is face-to-face and or online. So students may opt to have face-to-face classes and or synchronous online classes and or asynchronous online classes. So again, the difference between hybrid and Hyflex is basically the flexibility in the choices that students may make in the mode and schedule of attending classes. Whereas for hybrid, it is compulsory that they attend face-to-face classes on certain days, as in literally go to school to attend classes on particular days, and on other days, they stay at home for their online classes. Now, the Hyflex approach or modality was actually designed or created by Dr. Brian Beatty, who is an associate professor of instructional technologies at the San Francisco University. And of course, because he is the proponent of such course, he basically ended up becoming the go-to person or the editor of hybrid flexible course designs. And all hybrid and all Hyflex courses worldwide are patterned from the original course, which he designed, which primarily intended to serve the purpose of bridging students from face-to-face to full online classes. So they started to pilot this in their graduate schools, and it eventually gained popularity and especially got fast-tracked to becoming among the more mainstreamed teaching modalities because of the pandemic. So in the Hyflex course, there are 4 values that have to be observed or practiced. First is Hyflex courses afford learner choice. And we'll talk more about each of the 4 values in just a little while. There is also the reusability value, the equivalency value, and accessibility value. So all Hyflex courses have to have this. Of course, Some schools offering Hyflex courses have chosen to modify the values that they follow or that they observe in their Hyflex offerings, but all these modifications stem from these four original values. Okay, when we talk about learner choice, we are referring to the opportunity that learners are given in order for them to select alternative modes of engagement that work best for them. Equivalence, on the other hand, is described to allow students the opportunity to learn and accomplish the same learning outcomes and to exert equivalent effort, all the while interacting with the class, with their materials, and with their instructors, regardless of the mode of learning selected by all students. So even if you choose face-to-face and asynchronous components of the Hyflex class, for example, you will definitely learn the same thing and be expected to accomplish the same learning outcomes as those students who have chosen synchronous online sessions, for example. So the teacher has to consider that in the planning of his or her classes, that there is going to be equivalence in all three learning groups. Reusability refers to the fact that the resources that the teacher used or prepared for use in face-to-face and online classes, such as the video recordings, the PowerPoint presentations, the discussion notes, including online and offline tasks, may be reused for students in asynchronous modes and vice versa. And finally, the fourth value, which is accessibility, talks about the need for all students in all learning groups to have equal access to resources, technology, and even the skills and training that are given to students regardless of their elected teaching learning modes. Okay, now this is how the Hyflex classroom would look like. You have your teacher who is doing face-to-face classes with some students and who is at the same time joined online synchronously by another group of students. So a Hyflex classroom would look like this. There is a class that is being done with group A, the face-to-face group, and together with group B, the online synchronous group. And of course, we expect that at their own convenience, there is a group C, the learners who have chosen to do online asynchronous classes for that given period. So they really have the choice. They really have the agency to select which particular teaching component they would like to choose for that particular week, for example, or for that particular schedule. If they would like to go to the classroom and meet with their teachers and classmates, or if they'd like to just stay online and join synchronously, or especially if students prefer to do asynchronously, then they will be joining the rest of the class at their own particular convenience. The difference between hybrid and Hyflex class, however, is that in Hyflex, the teacher teaches in class or face-to-face and remote or online students at the same time. Whereas for hybrid, there is a particular schedule for when students will meet their classmates and their teachers face-to-face, and of course, another separate schedule for when they are going to do their online classes. So this is how the Hyflex classroom looks like. And this is a clear example of the first value of the Hyflex teaching modality, which is learner choice. And then, of course, we are not to forget that all these learners from groups A, B, and C need to have access to the same materials and to have the same knowledge and skills taught to them as with those students in the face-to-face and the online synchronous group. So that again illustrates accessibility. And the teacher whose materials are used for this particular day's class with groups A and B will also have to make the same materials available to group C, which illustrates the core value on reusability. So all these three learner groups will have to experience equivalence to fourth core value, not only in the materials, not only in the expectations of accomplishing the same learning goals, not only in the assessment of the skills that they are expected to have acquired or developed, but also they will have to have equivalence in the training, in the technology, and the materials that are made available to them. Here's a picture of another class, Hyflex class. As you can see, there are monitors at the back, and there are cameras and microphones within the room that are spread out so that the students, Group B, those who are doing online synchronous sessions, will be able to interact with their teacher and with their classmates who are doing face-to-face classes. Therefore, there is a need for schools to really set up their classrooms to convert them from, of course, the traditional face-to-face classrooms into a Hyflex classroom, because there is a need for additional microphones, cameras, monitors, and of course you have your computers. And in fact, in this picture, it is very obvious here that the teacher is talking to or addressing one of the students in the synchronous session. And in fact, some of the students in the face-to-face group are looking at the back, looking at the person talking to the teacher. So there is a need for a sense of community to be created in the Hyflex class. The learner groups must all feel like they are on the same pace and that they're receiving the exact same lessons and materials and skills. They should not feel alienated at all. And that is a challenge, admittedly, for the teacher to make sure that no student is left behind. These next pictures was taken from a demonstration teaching on Hyflex learning in Luzon. So this is proudly Filipino example. So the teacher here is doing a Kahoot game with the students in the face-to-face group and those in the synchronous online group. So as you can see, the students in the face-to-face group are using their cell phones to do the Kahoot game. And of course, those in the online synchronous group are using either their cell phone or yet another laptop or another computer for the Kahoot game. There is this TV here so that the teacher's screen is being shared and is visible to the face-to-face group. And of course, it is obviously very much visible likewise to the synchronous group. And because teachers are to record the day's class, then those in the asynchronous online group will also get to see everything that has happened with the live session for that day that the face-to-face and synchronous online groups have seen and participated in. Okay, let's now move forward. Aside from talking about the class setup, especially when it comes to the three learning groups, this is also how the learning goals or target outcomes would look like in the Hyflex class. So the learning goals and target outcomes will be the same for all students, regardless of their choices in the kind of mode of learning, whether face-to-face, synchronous online, asynchronous online for that particular time, because it has to be the same skills being taught and the same skills being tested that is made accessible to all students in all three groups. Resources, the same for all. All meetings and materials must be made readily available so that students can access them online during or even after their class sessions. Instruction. This is how the teacher is expected to design his or her classroom. They need to design instruction that must cater to three groups of learners. So there is the equivalence there. There is the accessibility core value that has to be considered. But admittedly, there might be a need to tweak particular presentations from time to time so that it will be useful and made accessible to the three different groups of learners. But all in all, there has to be the same or at least equivalent knowledge and skills and activities that must be taught and given to all learners. And when it comes to assessments, learners are expected to be assessed on the same learning outcomes, of course. However, as the need calls for, there might be a need to vary the assessment tools to use for certain learner groups, provided, of course, that the same learning outcomes will be tested. But as much as possible, assessment, which includes assessment tools, has to be consistent and uniform or equivalent for all learner groups. Okay, let's now talk about the advantages of Hyflex learning. What is in Hyflex learning that makes it worth our time and our effort? It's something new. There's so much to learn about it if we decide to adopt this in our schools. So what should we look forward to experiencing? And what benefits does Hyflex learning have in store, not only for our students, but also for us, educators? Okay, let's talk about the benefits of Hyflex learning. First, it allows students flexibility in their choice of how and when to attend classes. So obviously, if they would prefer to attend face-to-face for this particular schedule, they have the option. If they would still want to attend face-to-face again the next time, or if they would opt to do it synchronous online, or if they would opt to still just access the lesson or the session asynchronously for the next time. So there is flexibility. And given our health situation, this is really a big plus, a big advantage on the side of students. And in certain respects, also an advantage on the side of teachers, because teachers wouldn't have to manage as many students inside the physical classroom as we normally do during the traditional face-to-face setup. Next, it considers the various learning styles and preferences of students. Some students like to take advantage of the socialization part that is made available to them in the face-to-face and online synchronous classes, while others who are more introverted would perhaps choose to just stay at home and do online synchronous or even asynchronous classes. Some students are more visual, and so they want to see their teachers, see their materials. They have the options to either go physically to school or just join online synchronously. Yet others might prefer to just listen or read notes or listen to the recordings. And if they feel that asynchronous would be the best option for them, at least at that given point, then they may do so. It mitigates the health risks associated with gathering of large groups of learners in the same physical space. This one is, of course, very much self-explanatory. It reduces classroom management demands for teachers. So there won't be that many students to handle physically or to manage physically. But this is also in a way arguable because you may not have that many students to manage in the physical classroom, but remember you also have students joining you in the online synchronous and the asynchronous classes. So in a way, you also have to manage them and make sure that they're doing the tasks and make sure that they still understand. And as a need arises, you also still have to make sure that they're following your instructions and not disrupting the class. But in a general sense, if there are less or fewer students attending the session physically and synchronously, then there are fewer students to also manage. Okay, the Hyflex design or the Hyflex modality is in itself already a built-in contingency plan for when classes would not be possible or face-to-face classes would not be possible or would need to be suspended, especially in the light of the pandemic. So we don't know when the alert levels might go up again and when classes would need to be suspended. Schools don't need to panic because there is already the provision of a backup plan in the Hyflex learning because you can still hold your classes online. The disadvantage this time of Hyflex learning, what are these? First, and perhaps for us educators, especially for the classroom teacher, this is the biggest disadvantage, I would say, or the biggest challenge, because you have to think of, plan for, teach to, and assess all three different groups of students. So you have to make sure all your materials, all your sessions, your activities, and even your assessment tools would be appropriate for and would address the needs of the different learning groups. There is a challenge, of course, to also engage all three learner groups, especially the asynchronous group, because you don't get to see them, at least not for that particular session that they wherein they choose not to attend face-to-face or synchronously. And there might be a challenge to reach out to them and especially to engage them in class. Third, this is a really new teaching learning modality, especially for us in the Philippines. And anything that's new requires intensive training, not only of teachers, not only of school personnel, but also of students. The Hyflex learning is likewise ideal for students who have already experienced online classes, but is not for everyone. And everyone here that is to be excluded would include students who don't have access to internet connectivity, students who do not have the skills of navigating an online classroom or a virtual classroom. This is not for those who don't even have electricity in their areas. So definitely this is not for everybody. This is best for those who have already undergone online classes. Okay, learners who have the option may end up not choosing the best modality or component for them, but may end up choosing those that are most convenient to them. Some students may say, I don't like to go physically to school. I would just do things online asynchronously most of the time because they don't really need to wake up that early if they have the option to do things asynchronously, at least for most of the sessions. And so they might say, I have more freedom in my time. But the problem is if these students do not have the time management and the discipline that is necessary to make asynchronous learning effective, they may end up having struggles with learning in the Hyflex setup. So these are just some of the disadvantages, basically the more common disadvantages of Hyflex learning. Now, what are the implications of all these? How do we prepare for the shift to Hyflex learning? Let's talk about each of the things that we can do as a school to make the shift to Hyflex learning feasible and successful. First, all schools must invest in quality ICT infrastructure. It's not just about computer sets, it's not just about internet connections. We really need to install additional monitors in the classroom, additional cameras, additional microphones. Our teachers likewise would not just need quality ICT infrastructure, but quality and intensive and ongoing and continuous faculty or school development training. We need to train school personnel, the faculty foremost, the ICT team in your schools, even your office staff, because once you decide to go full swing and adopt Hyflex learning, we expect that there will have to be glitches and challenges along the way. One of these challenges would be with the technology that is to use. Therefore, teachers and the support staff would have to be familiar with the technology to be used, because knowing how to operate the computer may not necessarily be enough. Remember, this is an entirely new setup, or at least this is a more complex setup than what we have been used to. Therefore, there is a need for not only training, but practice. And so teachers have to be very familiar with the technology to be used, especially since the students themselves will also need the same training as teachers would. Be ready with a backup plan for when technology fails. So if there is a downtime, or if there is an internet issue, or if the cameras don't work, the microphones don't work, make sure to have a backup plan so as not to disadvantage the students in the online groups. Okay, one thing that we teachers do and are good at is giving classroom rules, right? We lay down our expectations on the first day of class, and that is the same thing that we have to do as well in the Hyflex setup. In fact, we might need to do more of that because there are 3 learner groups that we have to manage, and they have varied needs given the setup that they will be choosing from throughout the entire school year. And therefore, there has to be very, very clear sets, or there have to be clear sets of classroom expectations, rules, and even class directions to be given and made clear to each of the 3 learner groups. And we have to make it known to all students, because it does not necessarily follow that those students who have chosen to be in the face-to-face classroom for week 1 will be the same students who will be joining you face-to-face for week 2, week 3 until the end of the school year. Students can choose when they would like to go to school, when they would like to join online synchronously, and when they would like to join online asynchronously. But of course, as a school, you also have the option to narrow down those choices a bit. Okay, you can probably provide schedules, and of course, given the minimum health requirements, we could not also allow all students to just go to school all at the same time in the full or maximum capacity, because we also have to make sure not only that the health protocols are met, but also that the space, the physical space, and the technology that we have set up in the classroom would be able to accommodate them. So there have to be very, very clear expectations for all students that they have to follow when they opt to join the face-to-face group, the synchronous group, and the asynchronous group. And this also goes with telling them what to do whenever technology fails, for instance. Okay, schools must also designate a help desk team that will handle all queries, requests for assistance, and complaints coming from students, coming from parents, and even from the faculty themselves. So it should not just be the teacher doing all the troubleshooting. There has to be the support staff, the ICT team that has to handle, especially technology-related requests, queries, and complaints, because the teacher should focus more on the classroom, and all other tasks that may be handled by a help desk or a support team must be given to a separate group of people so that the teachers would devote their time and energy on what is more important to them and what they are expected to do. That is the actual teaching. Schools must create a digital repository for all the teaching learning resources that may be shared with colleagues or with other teachers. Those who have embarked, for example, on online distance learning for the past 2 years know that there is a wealth of digital resources that have already been collected and created by teachers themselves. And sometimes all we just need is to make this available to other teachers so that teachers not only save time and energy from having to research, from having to create their own resources, but also would have a plethora of materials available to them from which they can select the best resources to use for a particular lesson, activity, or even assessment. So it would be very good if schools could create a digital reservoir wherein teachers may just have access to these materials in a particular in this particular digital repository. So it's one thing that we all can do to make the transition to Hyflex learning so much easier, especially on the part of the teachers. Now, whenever possible, and I really hope that schools would have this made available for teachers, that there is a teaching assistant. We don't really have to hire because we, of course, know the implications of hiring, and I don't think we have the luxury of adding to the financial liabilities of the schools at the moment. But they could always find creative ways to assign a teaching assistant, which may be a co-teacher who is not having a class at that time, who may serve as a technical assistant. Or, of course, we should have our ICT personnel or a trained support staff who can help the teacher having classes troubleshoot technical problems so that classes will go on and the teacher will not have to alienate the online students or even the face-to-face students just because of a technical problem. There is a need, of course, for teachers to collaborate with their peers in teaching the same course in the preparation of the instructional plan. So more heads are better than one. If there is a teacher or if there are two or more teachers handling the same subject, or even teachers from the same year levels or grade levels teaching the same subject area, it would really be helpful for the teachers if they would brainstorm, sit down, and plan together how to go about the different lessons and activities. Okay. Teachers, the emphasis in Hyflex learning or even in remote learning in general is more on skills transfer and application and less on knowledge and comprehension. Why? Okay, number one, not only because skills transfer, application, and especially creation are far higher up in the Bloom's level of taxonomy, therefore guaranteeing higher order thinking skills, but also because we are aware that in the remote setup, remember we have an online component in the Hyflex teaching modality. We are aware that in the remote setup, the question on academic integrity, the question on the reliability of test scores will always be one of our challenges. So it is imperative for us to focus on activities and tasks that will develop and allow students to demonstrate skills transfer and application more than we would on those that are knowledge and comprehension based. Okay. It is good for us to benchmark the best practices of those schools that have already operated under Hyflex learning. And there are a lot that we can find, especially abroad. Let's read up on their experiences and let's learn from their mistakes so that we won't necessarily have to repeat their mistakes anymore. Whenever possible, there is an absolute need to pilot or dry run the Hyflex setup prior to the class opening, especially if you have summer class offerings, for example, or enrichment classes or remediation classes, for instance, and you have the opportunity to already pilot your Hyflex classes, that would be very, very practical. That would serve as your learning ground, taking a look at what works and what does not and what needs improvement before you go full swing come school year 2022-2023. Furthermore, because this is a new approach to teaching and learning, we should, of course, orient our learners and their parents or guardians, if possible, or as needed, depending on the age level of your students. You have to teach them, orient them, and provide them with their own training on how to navigate the Hyflex setup. Okay, I've mentioned this earlier. There is a need for teachers to create a sense of community or engagement with all the learners across the three groups. So do not leave out any of your students. That is why all materials and activities have to be equivalent, reusable, and accessible to students, regardless of their learner choice. Okay, once you have started classes with Hyflex modality, there is a need to continuously seek feedback from teachers, from students, and other stakeholders with the sole purpose of improving the way you do things. Okay, one of the challenges that teachers would have in the Hyflex classroom is how to engage all three learner groups. So here are some examples, some proposed activities and techniques that you can employ so that your learners will be more engaged in the Hyflex classroom and therefore learning will become more effective. One is to make use of interactive tools such as polls, your whiteboard, your chat, because that will allow even the shy students the opportunity to also answer and participate. There's a need for you to allow and in fact encourage students to give feedback and to peer critique each other. So it's even good if you could design activities that would require peer feedback. Like for example, if you ask them to write something, you let them give their work, exchange work, for example, with somebody, and for this person to go over their essay and offer feedback or critique it before this gets submitted to the teacher. So that it does not only allow students to also sharpen their feedback giving and receiving skills, but it also allows them to reach out to each other and therefore establish engagement across the different learning groups. Podcasts would be a good material that would engage learners. Recorded videos, not only for them to watch, but also for them to create. Could be good for them to work on videos, like a vlog, for example. They would love that and that definitely would increase engagement for their students. Discussion forums have been proven to encourage engagement because students just get to answer their questions, answer a question, ask their questions, or even just provide each other with insights or help, or they share their opinions in a non-threatening manner. Show and tell activities, even if they are done virtually, are also a surefire engagement eliciting strategy. Collaborative tasks. If possible, collaborative tasks across learning groups, not only with all face-to-face, all synchronous learners, but as much as possible, collaborative tasks worked on by students from the different learning groups. And of course, we have to flip the class. We have to give our students their reading assignments, allow them to watch recorded sessions on our lessons so that when they do attend classes, they will have to focus more on doing hands-on activities or demonstrations. They will have the opportunity to ask and answer questions, to explore the topic further, and no longer sit down and just listen to the teacher or to the reporter introducing the topic. So, of course, we flip the classroom. We already have them introduced to the lesson so that when we meet them either face-to-face or synchronously, we will be spending this valuable time for even more in-depth discussion, feedback giving, and demonstrations. And definitely, whenever there is an online component, gamified activities will be a huge help. Students would love to do it, even if it's not recorded, because they love games. This is their world. They love games, they love interactive activities, and therefore gamified activities would always do the trick. Okay, let's now talk about assessment. What are some of the assessment tools that may be used in the Hyflex classroom? Okay, open book exams. Of course, remember the focus that we should have, teachers, is on skills transfer, application, and even creation. Not much on knowledge and comprehension, because this can be Googled. This can be answered by someone else. So we allow them to open their resources. We make available resources to them. We design our assessment in such a way that even if they will Google, even if they will look up their notes, they will have to provide us with answers that would reflect not only their understanding, but their skills transfer and their ability to apply these lessons in real life and to create their own ideas, their own materials based on what skills they have learned from the lesson. So open book exams, let's give it to them. Let them use whatever resources they like, for as long as our assessment tools are designed to be cheat proof and to reflect real understanding and skills transfer. Blog posts. If we allow them to write blog posts, then their natural creative abilities would flow. And in the writing of the blog posts, of course, they would have to look back to what we have taught them in the lesson part of the activity and also look up other resources, and they would love it. And they would be able to give us an output that reflects their understanding and skills development. Hybrid pair work would also be very good. Our students love to interact with each other. So if we allow them to do pair work or collaborative tasks, then we allow them to discuss, develop a lot more skills, including socialization, develop their emotional quotient, and at the same time, we in many ways limit cheating, because they are free to talk. They are free to ask for help from their peers. Of course, the teacher just has to make sure that the assessment would reveal more or less an equivalent amount of effort given by the students in the group or in the pair, and that the output would not be a reflection only of the work of one or two students, while the rest would end up becoming freeloaders. Okay, video presentations. Our students love to talk, love to video record themselves. So let's use this assessment tool as one way by which they can demonstrate their skills and create a new material that would reflect what they have learned from our classes. Case studies, something to do with transfer of learning, is another surefire way to test students in the Hyflex classroom. Demonstrations, of course, which they can do either face-to-face or synchronously or asynchronously, would be a great skills demonstration or skills transfer assessment tool. Back channel discussions, I'll be talking more about that in a while, as well as the Socratic seminars, Socratic circles, or dialogues would all be great for assessing students regardless of learner group in the Hyflex classroom. Okay, let's first delve into the Socratic method of teaching. Now, this is a method of teaching that involves the use of questions. Okay, and questions are used to generate not just ideas, not just answers, but even more questions until all the possibilities are exhausted, until no one can already contradict something, until all questions have been asked, or until the teacher, or if you want, a student facilitator, feel satisfied with the discussion, the interrogative discussion that has transpired. Now, how do we do that? Oh, and before I present the steps, by the way, this is a very interesting quote about Socrates, which really rings true. Socrates, from whom the Socrative method of teaching was named after, Socrates didn't have an overhead projector, definitely he didn't have a computer, but he had questions, and he used the power of questions. And 3,500 years later, people are still talking about them, about him. That explains the power of questions to stir the mind and awaken creativity. Now, the Socrative method follows these simplified steps. Okay, the first step is the stage of wonder, wherein the teacher, or if you feel that there is a student facilitator who is capable of and who has more or less been trained to facilitate discussion, the teacher or that student may ask a question about a topic or material. And of course, alongside answers, there has to be questions given. Then you move forward with stage 2, which is the hypothesis, wherein students provide varied answers to the question. And then in the course of them answering the question, they go to step 3, which is refute and cross-examine. So based on the answers they have provided, students ask each other questions back and forth. Why do you say so? What made you think that way? Where can you find that in our material? What about this? Don't you think this is a better idea? Can you prove your hypothesis to us? How will you defend your assumption? How will you justify your answer? Questions like that. They don't only stir the mind, they really give birth to new ideas. So when students are done refuting and cross-examining each other's ideas and questions, you move forward with stage 4, and that is accept or reject the hypothesis. So students raise new hypotheses based on evidence and ideas that have been generated from the questions. And of course, the last one is the action stage, wherein the class summarizes the discussion and agrees on the best answer or answers or best solution or solutions. But of course, when you do the Socrative method, it has to be seamless. Of course, we don't tell students, let's now move on to stage 3. Okay, we are now in stage 4. Of course, we don't do it that way. It should be a free flowing of discussions and a free flow of questions. We ask to learn. We ask to give birth to more questions. And of course, at the end, there is the discussion and the agreement on the best answer or solution. The bottom line is, the heart of the Socratic method is not so much as to arrive at the best answer, but to get students to create better questions and to generate more and better ideas. So this particular assessment tool would really test knowledge, skills, understanding, critical thinking, creativity. And it allows engagement among all three learner groups. If you haven't done this yet, this will definitely be a great way to teach critical and creative thinking as well. Back channeling, on the other hand, actually, back channeling is used with social media, for example, with Twitter. Okay, it's a place, or in our context, it is a strategy wherein teachers can share with the class various resources such as slides, videos, links, photos, etc., and where students can post answers to teacher or peer questions, also share slides if they have found resources, links to resources that would add to the discussion. This would be a great way to discuss, to clarify questions, and to also build rapport or community. Now, this infographic says everything we need to know about back channeling in the classroom. So we use the back channel method or technique in order to start a conversation, to give examples, to ask questions, to share links, to poll our audience, to extend conversation even outside of the classroom, to practice digital citizenship, to check for understanding, to give everyone, including the really shy students in the class, a chance to participate and to gather feedback. Okay, so back channeling, very effective assessment and engagement tool. Now, exactly how does a teacher teach a Hyflex class? Let's take a look at a sample Hyflex class activity flow. So here you have instructional activities, the description of what's going to happen. This is just a guide for the teacher. And then on the third column, you see the number of minutes. Now remember, this is designed per lesson, or this sample was designed per lesson. So this may span 1 or 2 meetings depending on the number of hours or minutes allotted for your class. Now, for example, you see here lecture part 1, and there is a blank or space there for topic, and then you have 15 to 20 minutes time allotment for this part. Now, in Hyflex teaching modality, it is recommended that the entire lesson is broken into segments. That's why you see lecture part 1, lecture part 2, lecture and wrap up part 3. Okay, why is that so? This is to give all students in 3 learner groups time to catch up on the activity, to give the synchronous online students, for example, and even the asynchronous students, time to also catch up with what the face-to-face students are doing. Because of course, we have to consider downtime, loading time. We have to consider that sometimes the internet lags, right? So we have to make sure to give them time. Therefore, this is exactly also the reason why the teacher here interspersed the activity or the lesson with thinking moments. Thinking moment activities may be your motivation activity. It may be the review or recap. Any activity that will make your students think and do something, or think or do something. Think and reflect. This does not just allow them to process what was presented to them. It also really allows them time to write, to work, and also time to finish whatever was not completed in the prior segments. So you see lecture part 2 here, around 15 to 20 minutes. Then there's another thinking moment or activity. So this could be individual work, for example, or pair work, or this could be a quick poll. This could be a Q&A type that the students have to answer on the chat, and the face-to-face students have to answer as part of the class discussion. Then there's lecture and wrap up part 3. And then there is this provision for asynchronous viewers, wherein, of course, at this time, they watch the recorded lectures of everything that had transpired for that particular session. And for the online synchronous students, to think through all the questions and complete the activities that are done in class as a self-check. And of course, understandably, the face-to-face students have been given the time to also answer the questions and complete the activities in class. Now, for the assessment part, online follow-up assessment for all three groups, there is a homework that's done, and the teacher will just have to fill in what particular assessment type will it be, what's the purpose, the description, what are the instructions, okay, what exactly students are expected to do for that assessment activity, the number of points, and the due date. And it ends with a debrief or online activity, which is to provide feedback to students individually, summarize overall feedback, and post as an announcement in their virtual classroom, to briefly comment on the results of the assessment, and to discuss it during the next face-to-face session. So this is just a template just to show you how teaching is done in the Hyflex setup. Number one, it has to be segmented so that there is enough time for all three learner groups to catch up and take part in the activities in class. Number two, it has to consider all three learner groups. There has to be provision for the asynchronous, for the face-to-face, and for the synchronous learning groups. There has to be work that's to be done by everybody. And of course, we always have to have wrap up and feedback giving activities. So if you've done online classes for the past 2 years, and this will not be that much of a challenge to you. Okay, now we now come to the end part of our webinar session. I hope you've learned something from our session this afternoon. And let's answer, let's look forward, let's think forward as to how classes will look like next school year. Very briefly, allow me to ask you to use the chat box to type your answer to this question. How do you think will classes look like for school year 2022 to 2023? Will it be full face-to-face? Okay, these are your choices, full face-to-face. Will it be hybrid, wherein there is online plus face-to-face component? Will it be strictly modular? Okay, that's your third option. Or will it be Hyflex? Okay, I'm curious as to what do you think will be the scenario a few months from now? Will classes in the Philippines generally be more full face-to-face? Generally be more pure modular? Will it be hybrid? So there's face-to-face plus online. Or will it be Hyflex? Okay, kindly type in the chat box. Okay, just continue typing. Of course, we are entitled to our own opinions. I don't think there is going to be just one absolute teaching modality for next school year, but we're talking here about generalities. What do you think will be the dominant or the prevalent teaching modality for us to use next school year? Okay. And of course, the next question that we are curious about and we have to answer in conclusion of this afternoon session is, are we ready for Hyflex learning? Do you think that we are ready? The Philippines is ready for Hyflex learning. Is it going to be a yes or no? Okay, I hope you have typed your answers already. Thank you very much for taking the time to answer. I really would like to go through all your responses as I am really curious. Okay. And while you are finishing sending your answers in the chat, let's take a look at what the Department of Education and Commission on Higher Education representatives have to say about what they think about classes for the next school year. Okay, let's start off with Chairman Prospero de Vera III. Okay, this is his statement as quoted in GMA News Online's March 12, 2022 issue. According to him, sa ngayon, kaunti pa lang, 313 na universities pa lang ang nagpa-face-to-face. Makikita natin na unti-unting dadami yan at talagang mas marami pagbukas ng first semester ng school year 2022-2023. Of course, we are aware that for those areas with alert level 1 status, they have been permitted to go back to face-to-face classes. So the projection, therefore, of CHED Chairman Prospero de Vera is that come 22-23 first semester, more and more classes will go back to face-to-face. We'll see what Assistant Secretary Malcolm S. Garma of the Department of Education has to say regarding classes for next school year, especially in the basic education context. So we have two quotes of him here. One taken from a December 17, 2021 issue of Rappler, and another one in an October 21, 2021 Rappler Talk interview. So according to Education Assistant Secretary Garma, we are very optimistic that we can already transition to the new normal phase starting 2022-2023. And he has defined previously what he meant by new normal, or in our webinar, we refer to it as, in fact, the next normal, right? According to Assistant Secretary Garma, what I see is that the new normal would be a combination of the school-based and home-based. Hindi na talaga yung purely classroom ang ating new normal in education. So based on what we have seen from our education experts, we all want to get back to full face-to-face classes. That is the ultimate projection. However, realistically speaking, we have also seen the benefits of adopting the hybrid setup, wherein some things will be done face-to-face and other things will be done either online or through modular means or through radio and TV-based instruction. Plus, let us also not forget that some students, or there are parents and even teachers who have appreciated already the benefits of the online and modular component integrated with the face-to-face setup. So the hybrid setup has generally gained a wider acceptance in the past 2 years. And of course, we should not take for granted likewise that there is still the pandemic. So what do you think will be the setup that is going to be prevalent in the next school year? Will it be largely face-to-face? Will it be largely online? Primarily hybrid? Or do you think Hyflex learning will start gaining ground for school year 2022-2023? Whatever it is, I only have this to say, that we should be open enough and keep educating ourselves so that whatever our school's preferred teaching learning modality would be, we'll be able to deliver the best that we can to serve our students and the community. Okay, and to quote Daphne Kohler, she's actually a computer professor at Stanford University and is a co-founder of the famous MOOC, Massive Open Online Course Hub, which is Coursera. Now, according to her, online education then can serve two goals. For students lucky enough to have access to great teachers, blended learning can mean even better outcomes at the same or lower cost. And for the millions here and abroad who lack access to good in-person education, open learning can open doors that would otherwise remain closed. So let's keep our minds and our hearts open to more varied teaching learning modalities and whatever it is that we would decide to use for the next school year, whatever our schools would opt for, we have to keep educating ourselves because once a teacher, always and forever a student. In closing, let me share with you this verse from the book of Galatians, chapter 6, verse 9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you have learned something, and I wish you all the best for school year 2022 and 2023. God bless everyone.
There we have it. In behalf of Ibal Group Incorporated, I would like to thank our speaker for today for this indeed very timely and insightful learning session. It is an honor to have you with us today, ma'am. And to all our Kavibal viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to all our daily learning session. We would like to thank everyone and don't forget to register to get your e-certificate of participation. The link is in the caption of this webinar. We also encourage you to subscribe and watch on our official Google, Facebook, and YouTube channel. Muli maraming salamat at magandang araw sa ating lahat.